As elite German paratroopers descended on the island fortress of Crete in World War II, locals described them as resembling, quote, umbrellas falling from the sky. It was an invading force arriving by air for the first time in history, and it signaled the beginning of the Battle of Crete in Germany's Operation Mercury. Awaiting the German paratroopers were Australian, New Zealander, and British troops, along with the local population armed and ready to fight. Decrypted Enigma intercepts from Luftwaffe wireless traffic meant that the defenders knew the Germans would be coming. Operation Mercury. By autumn 1940, Hitler was sure the Soviets would soon invade Germany. He feared the Soviets were training an entirely new set of officers for such an operation. Therefore, he ordered his generals to plan an invasion of the USSR first. Due to complications in the Mediterranean, his plans were put on hold. Mussolini, frustrated with his comparative lack of conquest, launched an invasion of Greece at the end of October 1940. Unluckily, it was the wrong time of year. Heavy rainfall upended his plans. When the Greeks counterattacked on November 5th, they beat back troops to the Albanian border. The British bolstered the Greeks, preempting Germany to enter the fight. The Germans quickly secured the Balkans, making up for Mussolini's inability. Churchill directed units of his Royal Navy to the eastern Mediterranean, sensing that Crete would be the next target. Crete was the obvious next step for the Axis powers. The British presence on the island provided an excellent base for air and sea fleets and an advantageous post to interfere with German progress between Europe and northern Africa. British bombers could use the island to reach the Romanian oil fields and disrupt the Germans' fuel supply. In short, Crete had the potential to become the platform for an Allied invasion of Italy and southern Europe. For Hitler, it was essential to move quickly. He wanted Greece and Crete dealt with before an impending invasion from the USSR. He issued Directive 28, authorizing Unternehmen Merkur, or Operation Mercury. For the first time in history, an airborne assault would be launched. Forces previously slated for Operation Barbarossa were now ordered to deliver Hitler Crete before May's end. Yet they were only placed on alert come May 1st, 1941. They had only 20 days to prepare. Preparations. 500 Junkers Ju-52 and 53s were ready to transport troops. Many required significant repairs after attacks on Yugoslavia and Greece. An entire fleet was flown north to tens of facilities across Germany, Austria, and Bohemia Moravia. 493 aircraft were flown back to Greece by May 15th. Then there remained the issue of setting up infrastructure. Only a small portion of Greece had paved airfields controlled by German 7th Air Corps bomber units. Other fields and roads selected were assessed by Colonel Rudiger von Haking and deemed, quote, nothing but deserts. Heavy laden aircraft will sink up to their ankles. He assessed correctly. Outside of Topolia, an airfield had been plowed and leveled by a previous commander and was then generating 3,000 feet of dense dust clouds with each takeoff and landing. So formations would have to leave 17 minutes after each other. The issue of short airfields plagued the German campaign. Several were literally built on sand. The other concern was fuel. 650,000 gallons of gasoline were required for the nearly 500 aircraft. By May 17th, no fuel had arrived. The British destruction of the Corinth Canal on April 26th hampered a German tanker en route from Italy. Kriegsmarine divers needed to clear the debris to let the tanker pass. Upon arrival in Greece, trucks finally received oil and transported it to their respective airfields. The delayed arrival of fuel postponed the mission twice. Finally, German forces settled on May 20th. By midnight the night before, some of the aircraft still needed gasoline. Arriving late, paratroopers had to first unload drums and help fill up the tanks before the attack. To keep them ready and energized, they were given amphetamines. The island defenders. Defenses at Crete were limited. The Allies had even less time to plan their attack than the Germans did. The British hadn't even stood up air power before the invasion began. The Royal Air Force was still recovering from losing multiple aircraft to Cyrenaica. By April 1941, a mere 90 bombers and 43 fighters were left operating in Egypt and Crete. Crete itself had no aircraft to make up for this lack. Besides that, a few airfields were still under construction but not yet finished. Military equipment was also limited in the Mediterranean. In another setback, the British switched commanders 7 times in 7 months, creating instability. Group Captain George Beamish was made senior air officer at Crete on April 17th. He prepared to receive bombers from the 30th and 103rd Squadrons in Egypt with any leftover planes in Greece to evacuate the W force. The Navy attempted to deliver supplies, but most ships retreated under Luftwaffe fire. Soon enough, only around 3,500 fully trained British and Greek soldiers were on the island fortress. Halfway through May, The 4 squadrons had only about 20 planes, of which only 12 were operational. Worse, they hadn't tools or spare parts for repairs. The only defenses at Allied-controlled airfields were lightly armed with machine guns, barrels of gasoline, and a few tanks. New Zealander Major General Bernard Freyberg was made commander of the Crete force in April 1941. By the start of May, he had about 9,000 Greek troops, including those from Crete. The British contingent had 14,000 British men from its original garrison, plus 25,000 Commonwealth troops relocated from mainland Greece. The units were mostly intact, but lacked heavy equipment. Around 7,000 of those men were evacuated to Egypt, since they were considered superfluous. Yet 3,000 of those troops would not remain in Egypt. Between May 15th and 16th, the 2nd Battalion from the Leicester Regiment, previously stationed in Alexandria, reinforced the Allies. By May 17th, the garrison stationed on Crete included 15,000 British troops, 10,200 Greeks, 7,750 New Zealanders, and 6,500 Australians. 700 more men arrived the morning before the invasion from the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders carried by the HMS Glengiel. The targeting of Crete was decrypted from a message for the first time on April 26th. Yet the Allies were not fully aware of what was to come or the extent of it. They had expected the British to use paratroopers at the Balkans. They thought the recalled Junkers Ju-52s had only been withdrawn for a mission on the Corinth Canal. The British strategized that the battle could take place in Syria or Iraq. By May 3rd, Churchill was convinced that the attack was a decoy. While others warned him, Churchill requested more and more information. The invasion only became evident once the Luftwaffe stopped bombing Suda Bay to photograph Crete at the beginning of May. The locals fight back. The Allied troops weren't the only ones fighting the Germans. Pitchforks, utensils, and rusted muskets in hand, armed villagers, even the elderly, defended their land. Due to some expert shots, some German paratroopers died before landing. Many of the German officials involved in Operation Mercury would later express surprise at the fierce and ferocious resistance they met. Some claimed these Minutemen fought with conviction unparalleled by any professional force across Europe. When newspapers reported on the battle, they noted how terrible the invasion was and how strong the resistance seemed. The novelty of paratroopers served as German propaganda. The strength of the Cretan people served as Allied propaganda. The London Times from July 28, 1941 read, quote, 500 Cretan women have been deported to Germany for taking part in defense of their native land. The first airborne invasion. The first ever airborne assault started at dawn on May 20th. Fleets of Ju-52s descended on Crete, dropping beleaguered paratroopers. Under the leadership of Major General Eugen Meindl, 3,000 Nazis landed near Maleme and Canea. By the afternoon, 2,600 more arrived at Heraklion and 1,500 at Rethymnon. General Student's forces were often taken out before landing, resulting in a probable defeat unless reinforcements came. Resistance proved more intense than anticipated. 40,000 troops fought, led by Major General Bernard Freyberg. Still, the Greeks didn't have much proper equipment or supplies. The Germans treaded through their defensive line at Heraklion on the first day, capturing Greek barracks and docks. A counterattack recovered both. To demoralize the Greeks, leaflets were dropped by the Germans ordering immediate surrender. The following day, Heraklion sustained heavy bombardment. The diminished Greek units moved to defend Knossos. By nightfall, not one of the German objectives were taken. 7 Junkers were shot down. The Nazis' strategy of hitting 4 locations rather than issuing a single bold strike proved disastrous. The invasion escalates. After a New Zealand infantry battalion withdrew, Maleme airfield was taken overnight by the Germans. A night attack on Maleme was planned with 1 Maori and 1 New Zealander battalion. In the early hours of the 22nd, the 20th New Zealand Battalion launched a 3-hour attack. Still, it was unable to regain the airfield due to German support. Since sea landing wasn't a viable option, potential support units were shut out. At the same time, Allied troops were harassed by German Stuka bombers. Escorted by Italian boat Lupo, 20 fishing boats from Axis powers headed to Maleme. Rear Admiral Irvine Glennie's Force D intercepted them with 4 destroyers and 3 light cruisers. The convoy was turned around with half the boats left. Only the HMS Orion was damaged, and even that was caused by friendly fire. Only 1 boat reached Crete with 3 German officers and 110 soldiers. Another ship arrived at Akrotiri, where it met a British army patrol. Of those soldiers, only 1 crossed British lines to join his comrades. The Allies retreated southward. The 5th destroyer flotilla was sent from Malta to Crete, formed by the HMS Kelly, Kipling, Kelvin, Jackal, and Kashmir, commanded by Lord Mountbatten. The flotilla arrived after HMS Gloucester and Fiji sunk under the Germans. 3 of the Allied vessels were attacked under a raid of 24 Junkers Ju and 87 Stuka bombers. HMS Kashmir sank in just under 2 minutes. HMS Kelly capsized before sinking. Still, it succeeded in downing 2 Stuka bombers. HMS Kipling survived 83 bombs launched at it and rescued 279 men from the other vessels. On May 23rd, Admiral Cunningham canceled daylight operations for the ships due to the many losses. Air attacks on Allied positions continued. The Germans advanced, finding less and less Allied resistance after each demoralizing hour. The Greeks counted only 600 men and a few thousand rounds of ammo. Still, the resistance impeded the landing of German reinforcements. The Germans stalled by May 26th and beckoned Mussolini to send units. A convoy left Rhodes the next morning with 3 destroyers, 2 motor torpedo boats, 4 fishing vessels, 2 steamships, 2 reefer ships, a riverboat, 3 tugs, and 3 tankers as transports. The Germans kept pushing Allies southward with aerial and artillery shelling. At the same time, waves of mountain troops and armed soldiers on motorcycles took care of ground forces. The Suda and Beretania garrisons fell. Falling behind the village of Askifu, the Allied troops established a perimeter. On the evening of the 27th, 4 men, the only armed ones, held off a German detachment that penetrated the Allied perimeter. Early on the morning of May 27th, a detachment of 800 men landed at Suda Bay to buy time for the garrison to evacuate. British diplomat Alexander Cadogan's diary entry for May 27th read, quote, "Awful news from Crete. We are scuppered there, and I'm afraid the morale and material effects will be serious. Certainly the Germans are past masters in the art of war, and great warriors." The Germans barricaded the road between Suda and Chania, so much so that 2 Australian battalions' only option was to charge it with bayonets. On May 27th, General Wavell informed Churchill that the battle was lost. Freiburg orders his troops to embark on the southern coast for evacuation. About 6,000 men were rescued between May 29th and 30th, dispatched for Egypt. Tragically, on their evacuation, they were attacked by dive bombers and suffered tremendous losses. By June 1st, a total of 18,600 men plus 32,000 British soldiers had successfully been evacuated. 12,000 troops and thousands more Greeks were left behind once the Germans officially took the island on June 1st. While some surrendered, about 500 Commonwealth troops, scattered and unorganized, continued to battle the Germans well into the end of the year.